Think about the last time someone got close to you, really close. Did a part of you want to run? Or maybe you felt nothing at all, like you were watching yourself from somewhere far away. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone, and there's probably a reason for it that goes back further than you think. Childhood trauma doesn't always look like what we see in movies. It's not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's what didn't happen rather than what did. The love that wasn't given. The safety that wasn't there. The emotions that nobody taught you how to handle. And somehow, years later, those invisible wounds show up in the most intimate parts of our adult lives, our relationships. You might be wondering why you keep ending up with the same type of person, even though you promised yourself things would be different this time. Or why you push people away the moment they start to care. Or why conflict makes you feel like the world is ending. The answer often lies in those early years, when your brain was learning what love looks like, what safety feels like, and whether other people can be trusted. Let's start with something psychologists call attachment styles. When you're a child, your brain is essentially asking a question every single day. Can I count on the people around me? If your caregivers were consistently there, responsive, and attuned to your needs, your brain likely concluded, yes, people are safe, and I am worthy of love. That becomes secure attachment. But if your caregivers were unpredictable, if they were sometimes loving and sometimes cold, if they were overwhelmed by their own pain or struggles, your brain might have learned something different. It might have learned that love is inconsistent, that you have to work hard to keep people around, that abandonment is always just around the corner. That's anxious attachment. You become hypervigilant, always scanning for signs that someone is pulling away, always needing reassurance, always feeling like you're too much. Or maybe your caregivers were distant, dismissive, or unavailable. Maybe expressing emotions was met with indifference or criticism. In that case, your brain might have learned that depending on others is dangerous, that you need to be completely self-sufficient, that vulnerability is weakness. That's avoidant attachment. You keep people at arm's length. Intimacy feels suffocating. You value your independence above all else, sometimes to the point of loneliness you won't admit to. And then there's disorganized attachment, which often comes from environments where the very people who were supposed to protect you were also the source of fear. Your caregiver was both your haven and your threat. So your nervous system learned to be in constant conflict, wanting closeness but fearing it at the same time, never quite knowing whether to move toward people or away from them. Here's what's important to understand. None of this is your fault. Your childhood brain was just trying to survive, trying to adapt to the environment it was in. These patterns made sense once. They might have even saved you. But now, as an adult, they can keep you trapped in cycles that hurt. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in your day-to-day relationships. Maybe you find yourself constantly seeking validation from your partner. You need them to text you back immediately. You analyze every word they say, looking for hidden meanings. You feel anxious when they want space, like space means they're leaving. You might even create tests to see if they really love you, conflicts or drama that force them to prove their commitment over and over. Or maybe you're on the other end. You cringe when someone says, "We need to talk." You feel trapped when a relationship gets too serious. You might sabotage good things right when they're going well because intimacy feels like losing yourself. You tell yourself you're just independent, but deep down there's a terror of being needed, of someone seeing the real you and all your imperfections. Childhood trauma also shapes how you handle conflict. If you grew up in a home where anger was dangerous, where yelling led to violence or abandonment, your nervous system might go into complete shutdown during arguments. You freeze. You can't think. You agree to anything just to make it stop. Or you might flee, literally leaving the room or emotionally checking out, disappearing into your phone or your head. On the flip side, if you grew up in chaos, if conflict was the only time you got attention, you might unconsciously recreate that. You pick fights, you escalate small disagreements into big ones. Not because you want to hurt your partner, but because some part of you learned that intensity equals connection, that fighting means someone cares enough to stay. There's also this thing that happens with emotional regulation. When you're a child, your caregivers are supposed to help you understand and manage big feelings. They're supposed to say things like, I can see you're really upset. Let's figure this out together. Or, it's okay to be angry. Let's find a good way to express it. But if your emotions were ignored, punished, or met with more chaos, you never learned how to do this for yourself. So now, as an adult, emotions might feel completely overwhelming. Your partner does something that bothers you, and instead of feeling annoyed, you feel consumed by rage or despair. Or maybe you feel nothing at all because you've spent so long numbing yourself that you can't access your feelings anymore. Either way, it makes relationships really hard because you can't communicate what you need, you can't set boundaries, you can't navigate the normal ups and downs that every relationship has. Let's talk about something that doesn't get mentioned enough: the repetition compulsion. This is a psychological phenomenon where we unconsciously recreate dynamics from our childhood, trying to resolve them. If you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable, you might find yourself drawn to partners who are emotionally unavailable. Not because you're broken or stupid, but because some part of your psyche is trying to master that old wound, trying to prove that this time you can be enough to make someone stay, to make someone see you. The cruel irony is that we often end up re-traumatizing ourselves. We think we're choosing someone different, but we're actually choosing the same person in a different body. The same patterns play out, just with different details. And then there's the impact on your sense of self. Childhood trauma often leaves you with a fractured identity. Maybe you became whatever other people needed you to be in order to stay safe or loved. The good child, the invisible child, the caretaker, the peacemaker. You learned to read rooms, to adapt, to disappear parts of yourself that weren't acceptable. Now, in relationships, you might not even know who you are. You mirror your partner's interests. You agree with their opinions. You lose yourself in them because you never had a solid self to begin with. Or you might do the opposite, holding so tightly to your identity that you won't compromise on anything, terrified that bending even a little means losing yourself entirely. Boundaries get messy when yours were violated growing up. If your no never mattered, you might let people mistreat you now or give until you're empty. Or you might swing the other way, building rigid walls so no one can get close enough to hurt you again. Childhood trauma also shows up in sexual intimacy. Even without sexual abuse, trauma affects how you experience closeness. You might dissociate during sex, use it to feel worthy, or avoid it entirely because it feels too vulnerable. Some people become hypersexual, chasing intensity just to feel something or to regulate a dysregulated nervous system. Healing starts with awareness, understanding your patterns came from somewhere and once helped you survive. Recognizing triggers is key. When you feel panic, the urge to run, or the impulse to fight, pause and ask, "How old do I feel right now?" Often, you're reacting to the past, not the present. Trauma-informed therapy, like EMDR, somatic experiencing, or IFS, can help process what's stored in the body, not just the mind. In relationships, you can practice small steps of vulnerability, communicate needs, and choose partners who meet your wounds with patience rather than punishment. You can build earned, secure attachment, creating the safety you didn't get as a child through therapy, healthy relationships, and reparenting yourself. Grieving what you lost is part of the process too. Be gentle with yourself. You'll slip into old patterns, but that doesn't mean you're failing. Trauma shapes you, but it doesn't have to define your relationships forever. You can break cycles, learn new ways of loving, and build connections that feel safe and real. You deserve that.